All right, welcome to News Talk with Brandon and Bob. I'm Brandon Jones, sometimes called Pops on Pop Culture, host of What's Your Story, and with me is my longtime friend, someone that you know and love, the editor-in-chief of Outbreak News, the infectious disease guru himself, sometimes affectionately called the worm and germ guy. Yes. Yeah, you know, I call him Bob. Some people call him Robert, not Bobby, not Rob. Robert Herriman. Here we are, Bob. Here we are live with our first show. Bringing it in the middle of our Florida monsoon.
We are here.
We are.
We are here. Big storm going on, but nothing's going to stop the show.
Yeah, well, we say that, and then the light will go out.
Yeah,
so
well,
we're going to praise God that this goes off without a hitch. So it's our first show. We're so excited. We're bringing back that old dispatch radio feel of things, trying to cut through some stories, give you an idea of some things that we're paying attention to, hopefully cutting down to your time, taking in a bunch of this garbage news and that kind of thing. So
let's take a look at it.
Yeah, so right off the bat, I want to jump right into COVID. I think that's the story that's consuming everything, and we can cue the little CDC alert at the bottom of the YouTube version of this. If it's not there, folks, it will be there.
Yes, it will.
But I want to jump into that first, and I want to start with like I go to a site called worldometer.info. Worldometers.info. I'll put a little link there, and it's kind of basically just a bunch of data.
So that's similar to the Johns Hopkins one.
It's a little bit more comprehensive for me in that it pulls in a lot of real-time data. It goes countries. You hit countries. It breaks it down into okay. So, but where can people get good data? Like people right now are probably given all sorts of data. When does it report? How do people even sift through the data? What do you do? What do you use? Johns Hopkins? Use something else?
Yeah, I basically use Johns Hopkins, and then I determine what's going on the Johns Hopkins map, and then I go to that Ministry of Health. I get it straight from the source, whether it be Russia or Brazil or whatever the hot spot is at the time.
Right.
So I try to get it from them. Now, some of them are very interesting. You know, Brazil is, of course, they're a very controversial leader. Put things on there promoting the way Brazil's handling it, even though things don't work that well. Russia is kind of the same way. Venezuela, they're blaming everybody for COVID but themselves. So it just varies. But I do kind of steer clear from a lot of the mainstream media because it's very sensationalized, and I try to avoid that as much as possible. But sometimes you do get some good quotes out of it. But it's hard. It's hard. I mean, it's hard to find good numbers as far as particularly the models. Models are all over the map.
Right. So do you focus more on total death count, total case counts? What piece of data do you kind of look at? Because for me, I've kind of drifted away from total cases, because if we run 1 million tests, we're going to have more positives than if we run 100,000 tests. So I've kind of focused just on the graphs. And again, if I go to Worldometers, at the bottom, there's just graphs. And you can just kind of see the charts to kind of see, and really for the last 30 days, we've kind of gotten very, very flat.
Right.
But talk a little bit about which pieces of data are even worth paying attention to.
Well, you're right. You're 100% correct. I mean, the case counts is a direct result of the massive testing that's going on. In the United States right now, for example, we're doing about 400,000 tests a day.
Oh, it's a lot more than I thought there was. Yeah.
It's really funny. I was watching this interview with Mika Brzezinski the other day. She has some kind of expert. Everybody's an expert, right? And
except for you. You haven't been invited on CNN yet, as far as I know.
Haven't.
Okay,
I don't
just
think
checking.
it's going to happen anytime
Yeah,
soon.
the worm and germ guy doesn't make it.
No. But this expert said we should be doing 23 million tests a day.
23 million, really? 400,000, 23 million. We have just a random number.
Yeah, but which is, there's not supplies, there's not people to do the tests. It's
just an absurd number that somebody comes up with.
So I like I said before, cable news I definitely avoid because they are so sensationalized. As far as the numbers, I do look at case counts, particularly if there's a headline that I want. So Brazil went over 400,000. I need that information. But to find out what's really important is I do look at the death count, but not by itself. I look at it. If it's available, I'll try to break it down by age. And as you can see in almost every country, it's 80, 85%, maybe a little bit less of the fatalities are in people 65 and older. And as far as from a policy aspect, that's clearly the most important one, because you don't want to shut everything down with the younger people when you can kind of just try to protect those vulnerable people.
Right.
And you wouldn't have economies in turmoil right now.
Right.
But
So,
that is something I look at, even in Florida.
yeah.
Yeah.
So let me review. You run Outbreak News Today for us. You're pulling data directly from Ministry of Public Health sites, verifying a lot of the guidance through Johns Hopkins, trying to get into where there are raw numbers and that kind of thing. For me, I like I said, I kind of use just because Worldometer just kind of populates in real time. It kind of gives me some charts and graphs. I can see some of that kind of thing. Where do you see kind of our current state in that? And let me ask it in a compare and contrast. What do we know now in May, as May's coming to an end, that we didn't know, let's say, in March and April? Because my tone has changed dramatically, right? I was erring on the side of conservative.
Yeah.
We were seeing numbers. My concern was we were seeing numbers that were still doubling, right? So 250 becomes 500, becomes 1,000, becomes 2,000 every 3 days. And until we knew what that would look like, not just in New York City, but everywhere else, I was like, we have to err on the side of caution at least a little bit longer to get data. But now we've gone too long. We went way past knowing that. The graph actually didn't get flat. It actually been down.
Yeah.
Where are you at on your scope of what today looks like compared to, let's say, March and April?
Well, I would say,
Goodness, our storm is rolling through, folks.
There
This will
we
be
are. Welcome to the show.
be a video to remember.
there's been a lot of research. Of course, there's tons of money being dumped into research
Sure.
and testing and everything else. A lot of good research that's been done. So we have learned some things. What have we learned? We've learned about ACE2, and that's angiotensin converting enzyme 2, I believe. And why is that important? That's kind of the doorway for the virus into the body.
Right.
And why is that important? Well, we're seeing around the world that men are having more severe cases. They are higher rates of death, and that's because men naturally have more of this ACE2 in their body.
Okay, so we have more ACE2,
Right.
so we have more gateways to get more virus. So just biologically, there's a difference between a genetic male and female in the amount of ACE2, the receptors that we have.
Yeah, according to the research. Yeah,
Okay.
that's what they're saying, and I believe it. Also, we know a little bit about the severe pathology, and that is something called cytokine storm.
Yep.
You've heard of that? You've heard of that, right?
Yeah.
So the immune system just goes wild, and basically you start getting all this massive inflammation, and frequently you can die from that.
As I understand it, the body almost attacks itself. It gets confused by what is infection and dead cells it's supposed to destroy. It'll destroy healthy tissue as well. And once you're on that slippery slope, they haven't really found successful ways to really stop a lot of that in this elderly population.
It's really hard. It's really
Yeah.
hard. And another thing is, as far as pathology, I think that's where we've seen a lot of progress. Is a lot of people are, particularly in the African American community, is the issue of blood clots because of this. So now that they know this kind of stuff, they can give blood thinners and that kind of therapy to help these patients. So I think those things are pretty important. Let me check my list to see what else I put down here. Oh, other parts of pathology is somewhere between 60 and 80% of people that experience COVID experience a loss of taste and smell.
Right.
Yeah, so that's kind of interesting. But
And that was a key indicator because I know I've been tested basically 3 times. I had an antibody test, then I've been tested before procedure and right before procedure. And there's a lot of focus on shortness of breath and loss of taste or smell. And those were 2 huge parameters that they were asking for every time, asking multiple times, that kind of thing. So I guess that's kind of a very common theme that we have seen from our, because I don't really count the data from China. I count the data from Europe and then kind of going forward. So that's pretty much how you've approached it too, or some of that data. So I'm not going to disregard China 100%, but I'm not going to take raw numbers. I'm just going to be like, all right, whatever.
Well, and there's other countries that are like that. I mean,
Yeah, you mentioned Brazil and Venezuela. We're not going to get good data.
well, Brazil's probably pretty good. It's just that they're putting out little statements on their website like, hey, we're doing everything we can, that kind of. So they really kind of promote that. But even at first, I was wondering about Russia. It's like,
They had no cases for the longest time. But we know they shut their borders down. Like there were really border shutdowns back when China was flared up, Europe was flaring up, and they literally were shut. You could not get in and out of Russia. And then we have this massive surge now in the last year. Let me shift gears because I have to get into a little bit of the politics with this because I really want to do a compare and contrast with what your thoughts are. I think there's been a couple of great articles and talking about the difference between liberal and conservative. And this was a great article. I think this was from the freethoughtproject.com, and we'll put the link in the comments so folks can check this out for themselves. The difference between conservative and liberals. And Jonathan Haidt, I love the book, The Coddling of the American Mind, a great book if you haven't got a copy of that. And it basically talks, and there's a quote that says, Democrats tend to be more concerned because the liberals have an intense appreciation for the care and harm moral pillar. And GOP governors, while these governors in these states no doubt value care harm, their moral framework likely gives them a heightened concern of other social considerations, particularly those civil liberties. So we tend to just kind of throw these comparisons of how things are running in New York and New Jersey in the same conversations of how, let's say, Ron DeSantis is running Florida or how Texas is running, that kind of thing. What are your thoughts on how, do you think there is a difference of philosophy that's driving a lot of that?
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I think this has really brought out a very authoritarian streak in a lot of people. I think that this is representative in the New Jersey governor, the New York governor, the mayor of New Orleans, the mayor of St. Louis. They've all, at one time or another, used the strong arm of government to try to to push down civil liberties, and they've been very successful.
Does that surprise you? I mean, let me read the quote that this article used. They quoted Governor Phil Murphy, this is of New Jersey, and he says, during an interview with Tucker Carlson in April, I wasn't thinking of the Bill of Rights when we did this. We went first of all, we went to the scientists and said, people have to stay away from each other. So literally it was almost like having an agenda. It's like, all right, well, here's what we're going to do. The scientist said that. He's a scientist. I'm not a scientist. Okay, that's what we should do. Yeah. There was no pause. But we see other states where there's like, well, we're not doing anything until we really kind of see what's going on.
And that's because there is a lot of unknown. And, I understand that a lot of people want to rely on the scientists. I do also. But I think there's a big picture concept that's being left out. Everybody, if you're anti Dr. Fauci, for example, you are like the worst person in the world. You don't believe in science. You got to remember that. And I'm not an anti Dr. Fauci person. I believe he's a brilliant laboratory immunologist. I have no doubt about that. You got to remember, he's been around since Reagan. He's the consummate bureaucrat, and you can tell that when he's speaking too. He's a politician.
Right.
And he said a lot of things that were not right. Early on in January, he said that this is nothing to worry about. In late January, he told us not to wear a mask at one time. Right. He told us that we were going to have to be shut down until we get a vaccine. Right. That's a little crazy, right?
Yeah, right.
And then not long ago, he said that there's no guarantee that the vaccine will even work. So he's kind of, if you're on camera that many times, you're going to say things. I get that.
Sure.
But to take his word as absolute gospel, I just don't. And it's unfortunate that other scientists who may disagree aren't allowed in the public sphere that much. You heard about the doctors that were on YouTube and they got their video taken down.
No. It's become very clear that there's kind of a so to Jonathan Haidt's point. Of the feelings versus facts, right? Because I'm kind of a believer. I've done a lot of data at one point a while ago of how there's kind of like these two massive voices in the blogosphere of like the Daily Wire on the conservative side and the Occupy Democrats on the leftist side, and that these are the two main sites that have grown the most in, let's say, the last 2 years, right? But when you compare the data and what they're reporting on, it's like two completely different worlds. That is kind of what we're also seeing with how the outbreak is sort of not only approached and reported on. So, for instance, we have the Dakotas where nothing ever happened. Like no one ever saw a need to do much. We see that even in Florida. We have whole counties that are sitting on like 10 cases and 2 deaths. Meanwhile, most of our stuff is Miami, Dade, Broward, Palm Beach. It's in this one pocket. Again, it's population density, right?
Yeah.
So, but when we look at the feelings and the fact things, is this just another piece of that, or is it something that's different? Is it brought out? Is, like you said, it's kind of unmask what's there, or is it something else?
Well, I think that's part of the program. I mean, this is perfect scenario for Bill Clinton. He knows how you feel and that kind of stuff. Why do you think Andrew Cuomo has an 80% approval rate? Because he's the way he's talking to people, though he's done many disastrous things in that state.
Yeah.
But he's doing those noon presentations every day, and I work with a bunch of people who think that is the greatest thing ever. And if you listen to Fox or watch Fox, they will point these things out. MSNBC won't touch any of the mistakes he made, like the nursing home issue,
right,
and other issues like that. Telling people that you want a job, become an essential worker.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how
they didn't clean the subways. New York lost my respect. It was in early April. I remember it very vividly. It was about the week of between April 2nd and April 6th. There were all these photos that were being released. Subways were running. Subways were jam-packed full of people. Yeah. I would say that maybe 10 to 25% of the people that were in these photos had masks or any protective equipment at all. The doubling of cases and deaths were exponential every single day in New York. We find out not only was that continuing, they were doing no proper cleaning of any of that machinery that we know of.
Recently.
Yeah, so not until like May. So almost a whole month was happening. So of course you're going to have a stronger likelihood of expanding the outbreak or again creating that faster slope of that curve, where as you have other areas where we don't have subways in Florida. We don't have a huge look at how at Georgia with what Governor Kemp tried to do, where almost everything was localized in like 2 counties, Atlanta, this general area. Yeah. The rest of Georgia, it was almost non-existent, and I don't know. I
think a lot of it in New York too. It was very political, because you got to remember when Trump kind of was like banning travel from Wuhan.
Yeah.
Stuff, right? You had Cuomo coming out saying, "Yeah, go out, don't be afraid." The health commissioner, Cyrus Barbeau, I actually did a video on her. She was out there, go to Chinatown, doing all this kind of stuff. Yeah. And De Blasio was just as bad.
Yeah,
also.
De Blasio.
And this went all the way into March.
Yeah, Nancy Pelosi was doing this in California. They've all been but it's 2 different worlds, right? We're getting 2 different pictures. Yeah. There's black hats and white hats for a lot of people. That kind of. All right, so I want to finish the segment on like where do you land in these extremes? Where if you had to on a ones that are this extreme and you're here, where do you land as the scientist in all this? You've been doing infectious disease this whole time. I always joke. I said I think our site is probably one of the, if not the largest, it's one of the largest sites in the world where we are not backed by governments or universities or anything like that. It's a privately run, owned infectious disease site. So where do we land from your perspective?
I mean, how do I look at it?
I don't know. However you want.
Yeah. And my perspective is, before I was told I should wear a mask, I was wearing a mask. My wife was wearing a mask when she was working. She has a nail salon. They did close down salons. She stayed home. Mm-hmm. Fine. We still wear a mask all the time anytime we go out.
But that's to protect other people from you sneezing or coughing on them.
That, and plus I don't want to bring anything home to my elderly mother.
Okay.
And so there's a method to the madness, but I always took it seriously, and we talked very early on in the pandemic, but I was never hysterical about it, right? Just, you look at your own situation and determine how do you keep yourself safe and your family. And that's kind of how I handled it. Clearly, I wouldn't anyway, but clearly I wouldn't go to a bar or a rock concert or any kind of...
a populated area during any of this time.
Because that's just not smart.
Where are you at now on, like, let's say a populated area? Let's say that Disney's going to open up with some different restrictions, let's say sports teams, something like that. Where are you at on, not necessarily what you would personally do, where do you think some of the risk is on sort of a scale of things?
Well, I think the risks are really going to be minimized, because I've seen some of these plans, and they're going to have that social distancing in place. So I think, especially most things are outdoors, so I think the risk is a lot less too.
Yeah.
So my concern isn't there. Could I be wrong? Of course.
Sure.
But I don't have a lot of concern. I thought DeSantis kind of stumbled out of the gate, but I think he's done a decent job. you know, he took a lot of flack with Jacksonville Beach and some of those other things, but for the amount of nursing home patients we have, it's been pretty minor. I shouldn't say minor.
I always say one last question, but I always think of one last question. We're probably getting long on our segment.
I do want to talk about the death toll real quick, though.
Okay, go ahead and hit death toll, and I'll ask you one last.
And it's interesting. That is one of my questions, though, is about the death toll. And I've asked this to experts I've interviewed on the podcast, Outbreak News Interviews, and they never really gave me a good answer. So I did my own research, and most countries follow the WHO guidelines for determining death. And it's basically, if it's tested COVID or even suspected COVID, rubber stamp it as COVID, right? That's the cause of death. And there are examples that I read. The only ones that were not COVID were: did you come in? Did you have heart issues? Did you have a heart attack? Not COVID. I mean, so it had to be very, very strict like that. And most countries around the world are doing that. And I suspect that the case count is much higher than it is, just because of it's around. It's a virus. It's not going anywhere. It's going to do its thing. So I mean, if we live in fear, we're going to have a lot worse problems.
Sure.
And I suspect the death toll may be less. And this is why I say that. Colorado recently, the governor, a Democrat, had them reevaluate the death toll, and it was like at 1,100. And next day they dropped, or next week or whatever, they dropped it down about 250 fatalities. And the one example that really stuck out in my head was there was a guy who died, 35 years old. He had a blood alcohol of 0.55. That's fatal.
Yeah.
0.30 is fatal, and because he was positive for COVID, that's what they called it,
COVID
when it was clearly alcohol poisoning.
Right.
And so they may have been the trigger, so they went through all the records and they chopped off a bunch. Now worldwide, and I'm going to use Russia as an example, and I'm hoping, I don't know if it's true or not, but the World Health Organization and many countries are asking Russia, how is your death toll so low? They got 400,000 cases and maybe 4,000 deaths, right? And so I had to dig around, and I found an explanation at the Moscow Times. And what they said was that Russia, unlike most of these countries, they're doing autopsies on up to 70% of the fatalities.
Oh wow!
So that's a good way to.
So they're going to look at the actual cause of death, the complication that's going to be expanded on by having COVID. Not so. Let's say respiratory failures and pulmonary heart disease, different things that we know would be the
and that's a question I've been
actual cause of death.
How do they truly know the cause of death without an autopsy?
Yeah. And I
went 70% of 400,000.
Yeah, and I would contradict your data in that it to make it even more unreliable. Early on, again, Italy, right? Videos were happening through Europe and UK, and many situations in places like Italy and Spain. Patients would come in, they already have shortness of breath and a fever and whatever. They weren't even being tested. They don't have enough tests, so why are we going to waste a test? We're just going to treat them as a COVID patient. Well, is that a false negative, a false positive, or how are they going to code? I don't even know that we know the answer to some of that kind of stuff.
And there's a lot that has to do with the test too. I mean, I don't think a lot of people. I mean, it's done by the test that's common is real-time PCR, very good test. However, even Hopkins came out with a study this morning, and it was like, depending on what time during the infection, they're warning people of false negatives. If it's really early, you're going to get a false negative. If it's more than a week later, possibly a false negative. So the percentage varies based on what day of the week.
Right.
You know, I mean, other than Trump, who gets tested daily.
Yeah.
You know.
All right, well, let's wrap there. If you do have questions for Bob, or you want to kind of dive into anything we didn't get to, give us some ideas for next time. We'll get to those questions. We always kind of catch those up on the next episode, those kinds of things. We're going to take a little quick break, get to another segment. Thanks for joining us on our first episode of News Talk. What else we got, Bob? Got anything else you want to throw into the mix here?
There's a couple stories I like to talk about real quick. There's a magazine called Reason, and they had their 45th anniversary issue come out this month. What they did was celebration of the 45 years, they did an article ranking the 45 biggest enemies of freedom since 1968.
Well, it was pretty interesting. Let's throw some off the list. How did Mao Zedong be 35, by the way? That's easy. No offense to the greatest killer of the most human beings. I mean, I know Hitler's, the one that everybody thinks of. Stalin comes to mind, but Mao tops the list, and yet he's 35. There's 34 people that are worse than Mao.
And according to them, the worst of all is New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg.
Wow.
He's actually beats out number 2, Ugandan murderer Idi Amin.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's funny because didn't Glenn Beck take a bunch of heat for having like a Nazi Hitler Bloomberg image or something at one of his things or something like that? We got that on the Dispatch.
We sure do.
Yeah.
And but what the authors of Reason say is, on Michael Bloomberg's to-do list for government, defending us against our own unhealthy habits ranks above defending us against foreign invaders or marauding criminals. So you can think about that for a little while. And
just so we're clear, too, for people that, know everything, Dick Cheney was number 7. Steven Seagal, is that right? Steven Seagal?
Yeah, Steven Seagal. Well, him and actually number 3 was Sheriff Joe Arpaio.
Oh, Sheriff Joe made the list.
Yeah, so
right.
So there's a connection there between him and Steven Seagal.
All right, welcome to News Talk. I'm Brandon Jones. This is Robert Herriman. We're going to continue some of our coronavirus COVID talk, and I really want to get into kind of a very interesting extension of things that have frustrated many, many business owners. I think that obviously in libertarian circles, they're very outraged over this. And then if you have a small business, you probably have a voice and opinion as well. And that is kind of the topic of like, what is an essential worker, essential business? Why are places open? I know for me, I've had a hard time with them deciding. Walmart's open, they sell food. Liquor stores are open because evidently we need booze. We went through a phase where we were going to shut down Joann's and Michael's and Hobby Lobbies because we don't care about those craft people. We went after GameStop hardcore, made GameStop because we don't care about people who want to pass their time doing video games. It's just, what about an independent clothing store? But Walmart can sell clothes, but not them. And it's really become kind of a mess of things. So before we even get into some of the stories, I wanted to first let you speak to what is probably the appropriate definition of an essential worker? Is there one?
The government version?
I don't know.
I don't think the government version is appropriate.
Should there be 50 different versions, or should there just be a federal version, or should there even be a version?
No, I think everybody's job is essential.
Okay.
So to say otherwise is to tell that person that their living doesn't matter.
Yeah, we don't care about what you do.
Exactly. So, and I recognize this early on because I wasn't really thinking about that, but I remember the first time I went to Publix, and I'm watching how they're doing things and putting up the plexiglass and all that. This was months ago, right?
Yeah, February.
Yeah. And I'm like, I remember telling Maria, my wife, I'm like, baby, I don't know why every business can't do this.
They will.
To some extent.
Most of them have.
And that's right. But why didn't they let them do that in the beginning instead of start shutting people down? There was no reason for that. So instead, you got people in San Antonio or other cities that are waiting in lines miles long for food.
Yeah.
That's unacceptable. But I mean, essential. If I own a business, that job is essential.
Right.
People that want that service, that job is essential. To me, it's really that simple. I don't think any government bureaucrat should be telling us what job is essential. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that it is. I think that it wasn't necessarily a horrible decision. We weren't. Well, first, let me say it this way. I agree, but we weren't really shut down in February into that phase of March when we watched Publix and Lowe's and some of them put in social distancing markers on the floor, plexiglass safety splash zones, basically spit guards. 7-Elevens were putting up things. Post office put things up, and it's like, well, why can't most businesses do this? So one of the biggest problems I have, especially now, is we've waited too long to reopen because all you have to do is go out and live into the world and realize there's a safe way to exist. I had no problem going to Aldi, for instance. Aldi has one of the best sort of guards because it's not only a plastic one, it's concave with a very small, there is no way either one of us could sneeze on each other or transmit a fluid of any kind. Well, and then you think about quantity of people. I've never been in like a cell phone repair shop with more than like 2 people in the place, right? Why do we need to close down T-Mobile outlets?
No, we didn't.
It's like, I don't even understand. Like, so we just unilaterally said these things because it was an easy, to me it's easy, that the politicians don't know enough science. Scientists are healthcare only. They don't care as much about the economy and the business. That's not their area of expertise. And it's a low-lying fruit just to say, well, we only need this. there, take that. That's what we're going to do.
Well, it's kind of, hey, we did something.
Yeah.
Right? And then the government does that all the time. Hey, we did something.
Right.
To make the populace feel more comfortable. But yeah, I think it's a huge mistake, and I think we're going to be paying for that for a long time.
Well, that brings me to the story. So the story is a Randy Brown story. It's a Forbes magazine did this, and really the question at hand is, what is the economic fallout? How long is this going to last? And man, that was a big one. That light didn't flicker. We're good. But it says that laborers' bargaining power rose, as did real wages, and this is looking at other pandemics in the past, looking at like the Spanish flu and those kinds of things. And it says it led to a breakdown in the autocratic landlord system. The Spanish flu also gave labor more bargaining power and raised real wages. So COVID-19 may bookend an apex of the global supply chains developed over the last 2 decades with China. And prior to the virus, it discusses tariffs and those kinds of things. So let me ask first, we've already seen the crazy effects of like rental, delaying rent, mortgages, stopping foreclosures and evictions. When this is lifted, there's going to be chaos if people get kicked out or getting foreclosed on. What do you think do you think it's a legitimate situation? How powerful do you think that is? And what do you think the recovery time is on something like this? 'Cause I don't even know.
Well, your first question.
I think New York is a bigger issue than some places.
I'm not sure I have an answer for the first one. The recovery time for all this is going to be long. I think it's going to be a lifetime long, honestly. We saw how long it took to get out of the 2008 recession.
Yeah.
This is going to be astronomically worse. We are spending money at obscene rates. And one of the reasons I chose I'm not going to vote for Trump again. He's been spending like a drunken sailor, and I can't support that anymore. And he was even on TV the other day saying, I have means of getting more funds, more funding. So he's talking about the Fed. That's exactly what he was talking about. So he doesn't care if he floods the country with currency. So were you
surprised by the landlords being demonized?
Oh, well, was I surprised? No. Is it correct?
Of course not.
No.
Right.
No. I've had friends of mine at work would say, that's their risk for having that job, that investment or whatever.
But the government's telling them they can't throw the people out that are not paying and find someone else that could pay.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and I disagree. I'm like, that should be up to the landlord. That's their property. Just because you have a pandemic doesn't mean property rights get thrown out the window.
Right.
I know that sounds cold and callous, but I would suspect that.
But each landlord could have made that decision, or each landlord, because like my personal mortgage company just said, click here, go to relief. I read the criteria just to find out what it is, and basically it's like, we'll delay things for 90 days. You can keep paying portions.
Yeah.
I assume that you can put a payment on, let's say, the end of your loan if you have to miss one or something like that. I assume companies are like, I don't want to tear the whole contract up if I don't have to.
That's exactly
but to basically just say these people don't have to pay. Well, maybe if they lost their job, but most people can pay or pay at least something.
Yeah, and I think most landlords, maybe I'm wrong, do have a heart, and they're not going to throw people out that willy-nilly.
There's no benefit to that.
Plus, so you get rid of all these people, then what? If nobody else has a job, how do you fulfill these contracts? Yeah. Nobody's there to rent. But the landlord, in the end, is going to have to start getting some money though, because they can't do any upkeep on the building unless they got money coming in. So.
And we assume their mortgages have been delayed as well.
Yeah.
I don't think that was as clearly defined as you, the individual, was.
Yeah.
What do you think about the tariff war that Trump's put us in with China? What the fallout? Because I will tell you, I've seen kind of a pretty growing sentiment of an anti-China thing. It definitely has become. I'm always reminded of the '80s with the way people got about Japan, and it was a very rah USA. We're not buying those Japanese vehicles. Mm-hmm. And that, obviously, it tapered off, and Toyota's probably one of the most #1 vehicles for years on and off again. Right?
They're all manufactured in the U.S.
Yeah,
now.
most of them have flipped, right? So, but they're different foreign companies with plants here, and vice versa. Do you think some of that will stick, or is this just more, it's just an emotional response or something? Do you think there'll be a little bit of that? Because I actually been a little bit shocked at how much that has been rooted in people's attitudes.
Yeah. I think for the population, when this is all over, that's going to fade in time. I think the politicians love it. Because the politicians are always looking.
Well, we don't have a villain.
We're looking for an enemy, right?
Yeah, we don't have a villain. We haven't had a villain since the Soviets,
I
so
mean,
we're looking for a villain.
We have Iran, but
Yeah, but they're not really.
No,
that,
right.
yeah.
So China's the villain. Tom Cotton's been going after that for a while, and several other politicians. So I think they like this. Is China guilty of anything? Yeah, they're probably negligent in some way.
Well, I think that I would be shocked if governments don't try to figure out a way to sanction them or something, just because of the lack of information. I mean, they literally are the origin of and communicating with who to say it's not human to human. Well, you hear that and you're like, well, it's something we don't have to worry about then, or it's this. So all we got to do is worry about travel. We can contact, trace people. That's where Trump gets blamed for January. We're like, well, we were tracing every single person in Washington State, and the lady in California, and we the guy that ended up flying to Texas, and we were seeing these very specific things. We were watching all of this, and then bam, it's everywhere. And it's like, well, wait a minute, what happened? Well, and then if you look at their graph again, Worldometers has these graphs, and you're like, China has this day, and then it goes completely flat. It's so absurd that, like, I don't know, a small state in America like Pennsylvania has more cases and more death than all of China does with its billion. It was so absurd.
Yeah.
I don't know how countries don't try to place blame and economic sanctions. So if that starts to go on a global scale, maybe.
No, I mean, they can do that. I mean, I think a lot of countries probably won't. I think the U.S. may in the end avoid it, though, because, I mean, when push comes to shove, we can only do so much against China, right? We're not going to go. They're our banker.
Yeah, but I think that there's something to be said too about also like the impact. I mean, do you think? Okay, let me phrase it this way. I think there's something valid and speak to the validity of maybe it's a wake-up call that maybe all of these medical supplies shouldn't come from China. Maybe just a bottom line focus is not necessarily in the best interest. I mean, you can't run certain type of cell phone electronic companies when every single part is going through this one country, and you're going to freeze it up.
Oh yeah, and that's something we should have known in the past. Anyway.
Of course.
Yeah, so that was not a good move in our country. But I don't think there's a whole lot you can do. States are suing China, countries are going to sue China. You're not going to get anything out of that.
Yeah,
It's not even realistic.
I don't even understand what. I mean, again, I think there's sanctions on a larger scale, but it's not something a state. Iowa's not going to get any money from China. It's like that's just silly.
Yeah, and I mean, what's the other option? War?
I want to get to the one last thing, and I don't even know exactly what to do. It's almost like venting because it's just so insane.
Okay.
It is one of our favorites. We can go back to the very beginning of our sort of semi-professional writing, and that's Paul Krugman.
Oh yeah, what a guy.
He wins awards, so he knows everything. It is Dow or die, right? So it is. One answer is that thousands of Americans may or be about to die for the Dow. We know that Trump is obsessed with the stock market. His long refusal to take COVID-19 seriously reported had a lot to do with his belief that doing otherwise would hurt stock prices. He may now believe that pretending the crisis is over will boost stocks, and that's all that matters. And he kind of notes that our Obama administration did this great response to Ebola, right?
Well, that's not absolutely true.
Yeah, I'm just saying. He thinks so.
Ebola he was very late on Ebola too, but
Ebola burns out in a different way, like a completely different apples and
oranges. Yeah.
And then he says, and I love the opinion that someone like Krugman gets away with, he'll just say, well, but the GOP doesn't like experts. That's literally how this paragraph begins. And then talks about that there's no policy ideas beyond tax cuts and deregulation. And then Trump in particular just does policy theater, sending Jared Kushner out there, blah, blah, blah. It is just, to me, I find this part of it all very disgusting. Like, I don't understand. I do understand because he's just this New York elite guy who hasn't had to miss any time for work. He's getting paid the whole time. So he gets to just say, nobody's essential. You need to shut everything down, and you need to just do what I think is best. And that's pretty much how I see this attitude. So I think that this is creating an even bigger divide? I don't even know, because you've kind of fallen in this middle now where you're kind of back towards that sort of libertarian middle sliding there. I'm not even sure that's the exact. I think this is actually even deeper than 2016.
Oh, it could be. I mean, clearly, I had a chance to skim that article, and it doesn't sound like the article written by an economist. It's definitely a pundit, first of all.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's really crazy.
And no numbers. There was no facts and data at all. So it's an economist writing about the economy without any data whatsoever.
Well, he did in the article. I did recognize that he threw out the Columbia University study. Yeah. You saw that, right?
Yeah.
But again, those are projections.
Yeah.
Why
how do you have projections?
Why is everybody going to jump on all these projections?
Projections are wrong. None of these things are right.
Yeah. And every morning, when I get ready for work, I turn on Joe and Mika, right? And they're just harping while they make their $8 million a year. While some people are really struggling, but they've been harping on this study. By the way, if you took a look at that study, it's not even peer reviewed. It's still in pre-published state, and everybody.
I didn't get to that level of detail. I couldn't tolerate it, folks. By the way, don't do what Bob does. Don't watch Mika and Joe. It's bad for your health. All that nonsense is bad for your health. That's why we're going to do this show, try to give you some summaries of stuff so you can just know they're crazy people who make millions of dollars and they keep working while I tell you that you can't go to your laundromat and dry cleaner. You can't go get a brand new cell phone. You can't shop. You can't get haircuts and nails done. These poor ladies that are just, this is what they do, is almost like a hobby. Your wife had an entire business that was just, nope, you got to shut down. Yeah. Why? She can have one customer at a time. Everyone wears masks. Everyone knows what they're getting into. It's just insane.
But fortunately, I was an essential worker, but if she was alone, she wouldn't be able to support herself. She'd be waiting for the government check.
$1,200.
Yeah.
Whatever. All right, we got to take another break. News Talk, Brandon and Bob, we appreciate you subscribing, sending comments, liking, and sharing. Anything you can do to help us out. We just want to be able to help people spend less time obsessing over some of this stuff, give you a cliff notes of some of the things that are going on. Thank you, and check back with us.
All right, well, welcome back to News Talk with Brandon and Bob, and we're going to switch gears to a brand new topic, and that's homeschooling.
Right in the chest. Right in the chest.
And very recently, we were just talking moments ago about this kind of rise of authoritarianism, and we're seeing that in other aspects too, and that's as far as education. And this is from the Harvard magazine. I just want to read something out of it. There's a professor up there. Her name is Elizabeth Bartholet. She's a public interest professor of law and faculty director of the law school's child advocacy program. And she's recommending a presumptive ban on the practice of homeschooling. And she says homeschooling not only violates the children's right to a meaningful education and their right to be protected from potential abuse, but may keep them from contributing positively to a democratic society. So Brandon, what I wanted to do is, you're like the perfect person.
You're just going to let me tear into this poor lady and how absolutely absurd all of her arguments are, or what? Yeah, well, she doesn't really make arguments; she just makes presumptions.
Yeah. And hopefully you had a chance to take a look at what she had to say.
I have a whole list of things.
So you've homeschooled a number of your kids.
Yeah, 3 of my kids are homeschooled, beginning with Jake at 5th grade. And that was a decision that was made because of him being bullied at school and the lack of the school's response and administration dealing with that. And then the 2 girls were both homeschooled, and a lot of that stemmed from the budget cuts to the gifted program, the way they were not sort of like triaging them and advancing them in the proper speed with their skill set. So we homeschooled them their whole career. Wildly successful. Sierra graduated actually early because she was able to dual enroll, those kinds of things. And I could not believe the phrase that she actually used of meaningful education. Yep. Like, the public schools are just so wonderful. And I went back and looked at just a few things, and I was like, wait a minute. So, we're always being told that we have constant safety concerns with our schools. They're always unsafe. That they focus on standardized testing, so they fall completely behind compared to other countries on They get no government, they get no social studies. The science is lagging behind now. All these other extraneous things. History is completely abolished. There's hardly any history, and it's all revisionist history with a very certain narrow focus, right? The bullying's out of control, overcrowding's out of control, and by the way, there is a lot of abuse in the school. I found some data. So my data, 2004, the Education Department estimated 1 in 10 students have been sexually abused by their teacher. That's 1 in 10. But Slate called this an epidemic in 2012, so just in 8 years. And then in 2017, we have the most recent data that I was actually able to find and verify came from 2017. And it said the kids from 8th to 11th grade, 7%, so 3.5 million students have reported at least some sort of physical sexual content from an adult, a teacher or a coach. Now, that also does include, though, unwanted touching. So there can be things that may not have been sexual intercourse, but it could have been some sort of groping or some sort of intimidation, but things that would have classified as sexual harassment within the normal parameters of a business environment. And now they're saying that this stat is predicted to be at least 10%, which is 4.5 million kids. So not quite as wonderful as she thinks it is, in my opinion.
But she thinks it's a threat to U.S. democracy.
Sure she does.
Yeah. What about the education? How do you compare the education between homeschooling and, I guess she's promoting the public school system here?
So the one thing for us that we discovered really quickly was, and I've always recommended with folks as they're even determining if they should homeschool or not, and obviously during the outbreak, a lot of folks have been forced to work with their kids at home, is one, there are a lot of resources. It is not difficult to get books, to get online courses. Most counties and states offer free online courses. Now it's basically the same curriculum. So if you want to make a change for curriculum reasons, that's not the way to go. But there are those options, and our kids took advantage of every angle you can think of. Mm-hmm. The one thing for us is we were able to identify their weaknesses, so we can slow them down and build them up appropriately, so they get stronger in their weaknesses.
Or possibly speed it up.
If it's weaker, we slow them down to make sure they get stronger at it. If it's things that they're already good at and they enjoy, we speed them up. So my daughter, for instance, liked to read. So Sierra liked to read. She would read way ahead of her grade level. We just kept giving her another one and another one and another one. So her advancement and her, like I said, she graduated early and college was a breeze because her reading skills were off the chart. Right? Her math skills were off the chart. She was very independent. Whereas another one of our children were not good at math, so we slowed that down, spent time to make sure we got those skills, and we at least made sure that the rudimentary skills are there. Were they going to be able to excel at, let's say, college calculus? Probably not. It would probably take a while longer for them to get further educated to get to that point. But they were able to pass the entrance exams for college, take the math requirements that they needed, get the certificates or degrees that they were seeking. I think that it also allowed us to be more flexible with electives. So whereas you may be in a school where you have very limited electives that they can take, some of our kids had needed electives that, first one's interested in sign language, so she was able to pursue that hardcore and get like 4 different classes, whereas a school might offer 1, right? One is in photography. So we're able to not only find 1 class, we're able to go online and find photography for some of the greatest experts. And obviously YouTube, you have people who are making livings doing many of these different things. I was able to give her expertise from someone who has 5 million followers. He's recognized as one of the biggest YouTubers in the nation, is a photography expert, to train her on how to be better at that. Is that something that will form a career or not? I don't know, but they're interested in it, and it was challenging to develop them. There were no gaps. The very first time we were evaluating, by the way, she does bold-faced lie on that. I actually had that marked. There's a paragraph later on, and she says, quote, that despite the even apparent requirements such as submitting curriculum and providing evidence that teaching and learning are taking place, she says it's not necessarily enforced. I'm not going to speak for the 49 other states.
But definitely Florida. We
not only had to, we have to fill out forms. We meet with most of these advisors. This is not some quick thing. First time we went in, my wife brought the thing in and she looked at us and says, "You're doing too much." we had to refocus on how to make sure that we were not just, just because they get through a book didn't mean that they go through another book, right? Schools, and just to compare and contrast, our kids were finishing public school and they'd be on page 90 because they started teaching for the FCATs and SATs and that kind of thing. Our entire kids would go through 2 full math books in a school year, 1 for each semester, without any problems, without any issues, and we were testing for retention to make sure they got it, we move on. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the busy work was getting in the way. Mm-hmm. So I find it disgusting that we're going to follow the lead of European countries where it's completely banned. Like if you go to Germany, right. There's been custody cases with people for religious reasons who try to homeschool their kids. All over the EU, it's very commonplace. They've taken this right away for you to take responsibility of educating your child. Right. And the shift to public education has totally gotten away. We've shortchanged all of the sectors that involve trade studies. So we have massive shortages of people who know how to do plumbing, types of engineering that involve physical labor and motor work instead of just going to be electrical engineers. We have those. They're great, high-paying jobs. But when it comes to doing hard repair work on machinery, we have a massive shortage of people. Those people are making a ton of money because there's no one doing it. They're all being told they should go to college. Well, not everybody wants to go to college. Not everybody should go to college.
Well, something else she said that's pretty interesting.
No, it's awful.
It's like, this is the role of a teacher, apparently. She argues that one benefit of sending children to school at age 4 or 5 is that teachers are mandated reporters, required to alert authorities of signs of child abuse. Is that what teachers' jobs are?
I didn't, but I love the fact that that's what they call it. Like it's somehow, so I understand the perspective. If you see it, you should report it, right? Kids have bruises, they should be reported. That is by definition what I thought that term meant when you read the handbooks and stuff was they're kind of letting you know teachers are mandated to report. But she's making it seem almost like tattletales and narcs that are going around looking for things, trying to coerce the fact that there's this incredible crisis and epidemic. I have not read, I try to find studies and data that try to show that. I got to be honest, everything I'm showing is a massive problem where teachers are doing something to the children, not from the parents at home.
Yeah, and just to close this out, something that really irritated me too, which said, quote, the issue is, do we think that parents should have 24/7 essentially authoritarian control over their children until they're age 18?
I don't know.
Should the state?
Well, I also thought, who has 24 hours control of your kid? Like even when they're homeschooled, it wasn't like they were in my house under lock and key. It gave us more flexibility with extracurricular activities because if they had to be somewhere at 3, we could get them in classes and stuff that would start earlier in the day because not all schools ended at the same time. They were in different age groups and that kind of thing. So we were able to really save resources. They could be in more things because you had a broader window that you could work with. You didn't have to go pick up one kid when elementary school ended over here, and then 2 hours later, this one ends at middle school over there. It's just pure insanity. And the idea of closeted homeschoolers, there is something to be said for some of that. We have met some that are a little more naive and closeted, but so what? Is that the worst thing in the world? Is that someone they have not been worldly enough for you yet? I mean, it's a crazy argument to make when you have actual abuse, alcoholism, drug use, bullying, all these different issues in schools as it is.
She clearly likes state control. But I encourage viewers, I'll go ahead and link to this article down below. Are you pro homeschooling? Do you agree with the author? Please comment below. We want to hear what you have to say.
There was an interesting story that I saw that you put up concerning a British woman named Rachel Harris. She was having problems with headaches.
Yeah, Rachel was having some headache problems, and doctors were probably a little bit surprised. In fact, I believe when you read the reports, you'll see that the person looking in her ear, giving her an exam, actually left the room to go get and confer with someone else. Now, I don't know about you, Bob, but if I go to the doctor and they got to go seek a second opinion while I'm still sitting there, they got to have somebody else come in the room and go, hey, come look at this. Needless to say, she discovered that she had maggots in her head, and it was due to something that you were familiar with. It's called a screwworm.
Yeah, it's just like any other maggot. It's from some kind of a fly, and it must somehow it must have found a way there to lay eggs, and hence the maggots.
Yeah, if you go to the weird news section, it is going to be featured on one of these educational type shows that's done, the Bugs, Bites, and Parasites show. It's in the UK, and they'll be airing that as well, and you can get, unfortunately, more information than you'd probably want on poor Rachel Harris's illness. So.
All right, news talk with Brandon and Bob, and I want to touch on really huge news in the YouTube and streaming worlds, and that, of course, is Joe Rogan signing the big money contract. They claim it's at least $100 million to hop over to an exclusive deal on Spotify. Spotify stock went up so much. They claim that they have already made in the neighborhood of like $5 billion of like stock value by spending $100 million on Rogan. First off, you can get Spotify for free, people, if you can tolerate ads. So it's not like he goes away completely. What do you think about, as someone that's been doing YouTube for a while? What do you think about the landscape of having sort of like that almost like a vacuum, like it creates this massive person? I mean, some of these videos have 10, 12, 15 million views. I mean, there's a lot of them.
Oh yeah. I think it's a great investment for Spotify, and they are getting ready to roll out a video platform too.
Sure.
So that's going to fit into Rogan's wheelhouse. And I think this is going to maybe open up the door for more people like Rogan. If Spotify sees a lot of success, because they're going to be taken from Apple, they're going to be taken from YouTube, because this is exclusive, right?
Yeah.
Exclusive is the way to go nowadays.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if we see other big names do similar stuff. Is it a slap in the face of YouTube? Maybe. They never censored Rogan, but that doesn't mean it wasn't possible.
But it's just frustrating that YouTube has become so complicated with rules. Like, so for me, one of the big hurdles that I got, it took the wind out of my sails because I was getting so frustrated. Like every single video, I was dealing with a copyright claim. When I'm following the rules that they gave me, then you have to go through a dispute process. Meanwhile, your videos, they're getting views, and they're saying, well, you're not going to get any money. You're getting demonetized during that whole time. They don't put it back, and then you'll have copyright claims that you just don't win for no reason. And it makes no sense. And you've gone through this tremendously over the last few months.
Yeah, when the whole coronavirus thing started, they were fine. And I don't know, maybe I wasn't, but one of the first people that were doing regular shows about coronavirus back in January. Yeah. I actually interviewed somebody the first time on January 10th, so I was kind of ahead of the game. Then a month and a half later, all of a sudden, everything was demonetized. And that was the rule. They sent out a little disclaimer saying everything that's COVID or coronavirus, they were not going to monetize. So it kind of took the wind out of your sails. So you just would stop doing content. Then out of nowhere, a few weeks ago, they started monetizing it again. But all the stuff that was demonetized
stayed demonetized.
Yeah, and they were also dinging me on anything that had virus in the title, all kinds of stuff. So
yeah, you were saying things like SARS and MERS and things that date back forever. I mean, stuff that dates back years.
Yeah, so
they would take.
It was brutal.
Do you think where do you think YouTube is on censoring? Because my big thing is I don't know what the rules are. That's my big concern.
Well, nobody does. Now, I mean, clearly, don't have the pull that Rogan has. Apparently, when Rogan, this is what I heard, when Rogan interviewed Alex Jones.
Yeah, I heard that story. Yep.
He called YouTube and said,
"This is coming.
Yeah.
You've banned Alex Jones. I know he's controversial.
Yeah.
I know you guys don't support him. I'm going to have him on my show, letting you know, so we can be monetized." And they monetized that.
Yeah.
That is to me a huge sign of their hypocrisy.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think they've been doing a lot of disservice to the original people, right?
Could you imagine if Jones signs on with Spotify too? We should buy Spotify.
I wouldn't be surprised.
We should buy Spotify stock.
No, I mean, I don't know.
Even if it was like $50 million, they're going to make so much money from these crazy people going over there because they love that guy. They love the antics and that and it's I find it what little bit of Alex Jones I can tolerate. I find it hysterical. Remember like George Norrie and those kind of shows that used to be the alien shows?
The Overnight Show.
Yeah. Remember those kind of shows?
Yeah.
That's exactly how Alex Jones to me. It's like, he comes up with some take and it's always about how extreme I can get. I can see him in a room, like he takes a story, like, that's not extreme enough. Rewrite it. Give me, it's like, give me something else. And it's like, I can see that. I can see him dropping millions of dollars to get this guy.
Yeah, I mean, it's a possibility because there's a market for that. I do wonder how other YouTube creators are looking at this, though. Like, say Tim Pool or whoever. Do they see this as an opening to grow their channel?
Well, they've said as much. I've heard Tim Pool talk about it on one of his shows, that it was kind of looks like that as an opportunity. Because his theory is that, just stay the course and do what he's doing, because there's a pool of money. And if they cut it off over here, it has to go somewhere, so it might as well go to me. And his name has gotten big enough now that if you have stories about him, you'll get traffic just because he's that big in that circle now.
And somebody like Crowder, whose YouTube is just
I think
bashed.
Steven Crowder's another. PewDiePie is a huge name. I think that
I think they just gave him some big contract.
YouTube did.
Yeah.
Oh, see, because he's the biggest one.
Think so, yeah.
I think he's the biggest YouTuber as far as like number of subscribers and stuff like that. But he says all sorts of crazy things from time to time. But the context is it's always taken out of context. So he'll have Nazi Hitler stuff, but his point is he's trying to delineate from what real issues are and people that are saying it's something else. I actually find him relatively entertaining, but it's very profane, and it's not nearly as interesting as Rogan as far as a show goes. It's just, Yeah, so, I mean, we'll see what happens. YouTube's going to have to... I mean, I think that YouTube is sold out to the corporations. Oh, you could just...
CNN, MSNBC, Fox.
Yeah, you search it just about anything, and you have all these big networks, and it's squeezed out the creators that got them there.
Yeah, I mean, if I put on a Tim Pool or a Crowder or a David Pakman or whoever, sure enough, if you have it on autoplay, it's going to go to Fox, CNN, or MSNBC as the next video. It won't go to another one of their videos. Sometimes it'll go to Rogan too.
If I go to Jimmy Dore and he's covering, like when he was covering Bernie Sanders, the next Bernie Sanders video it will play will always be from the mainstream. It will never give me another Jimmy Dore video, because I'm trying to look at someone who's completely different than me. He'll be pro Bernie. It'll immediately clip to one of those major networks about Bernie. Would never ever give another Jimmy Dore. He's getting totally jacked by YouTube. I'm sure he knows that.
Oh yeah, they all do.
Yeah,
and they're all talking about it. But that's the platform they have right now.
So, what platforms are there? Do you think is it just wait and see at this point for Spotify? Do you think there's other outlets? Do you think there's any chance of these other things really catching on anytime soon? What do you think?
Probably not in the near future. I do wonder what Apple's thinking right now, because Rogan gets how many millions of downloads? I mean, if you go on what used to be iTunes or Apple Podcasts now, it always has like the top 10, and he's always at the top.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's millions of downloads a day for sure.
Yeah.
So
he just did an interview with Kevin Hart, and it went up on YouTube 1.5 million views in one day, because I only got through like a little bit. So I went to watch it again, and I noticed that the view count in just probably less than 24 hours, it was 1.5 million in just that one video in just that short amount of time.
Yeah. Other than Spotify right now, I just don't know what other avenues there are out there. If you're a big name, you're hoping for a Spotify contract, though, I imagine.
Well, anything, yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So you said that some of the coronavirus and COVID stuff that you're running through, demonetization has gotten better and has stopped. Like they're letting videos through now.
And they put out a message saying we're not demonetizing. I don't know if that came down from the CDC or the World Health Organization, because they were probably I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. They were probably trying to prevent bogus information, but who are they to judge?
What other topics have you run into a lot of that with? Like, if I do this topic, I know I'm pretty much going to have a monetization discussion with them. Vaccines?
No demonetization with vaccines. However, there is the little thing under.
Oh, they do a disclaimer?
Yeah.
Here comes the disclaimer.
Yeah.
That's my code for there's going to be a disclaimer, folks. Just so you know, I do that a lot.
Now, I've never been an anti-vaxxer, so I don't do anything like that. But anything that has vaccine title, content, keywords or whatever.
But we had one recently where it was like something, maybe it was about COVID, because it was about Russia or something, and they were like questioning about it can be monetized after all or something. Maybe.
Yeah, it was the COVID one.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, who knows? I can't win with YouTube. Hopefully I can win now with this show.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Probably not. We're discussing topics that they're not going to be happy
It's
about.
a struggle, but
My first round with this, and you know the story, so I'll share the story with you guys so you guys know. The first round for us for demonetization was back on Dispatch, and I did an interview with one of these. She's basically a Catholic leader in the pro-life thing. They were at the March of Life promoting adoption. I did an interview with this lady. It had like 10,000 views in the first day, and then it got demonetized. And I went round and round about why, and the closest thing we got to an answer was because we had discussed it being an alternative to abortion, and about the second or third sentence in, never discussed that again. That was valid reason for them, I guess, to demonetize that video.
Yeah.
And it happened again during Trump's run in, I don't know, time frame, but I did a joke segment with our friend Alex Snicker. We were just having like a joke segment about like name adjectives for Trump, and it really wasn't. Either one of us are pro-Trump, and neither one of us were bashing Trump. It was just back and forth, and it got demonetized within like 4 minutes. And it got up, and then bam!
what did y'all say?
It was like going back and forth. I think we said like influential, bombastic, weird hair.
Oh, okay.
It was one of my funny segments. Like name 10 words that pop into your head about Florida. I do it all the time. I do crazy. I love games. 4 minutes. Trump didn't even make us a penny, man. We got demonetized in the first couple minutes.
No explanation ever.
No, the Dispatch itself has been completely blocked. I still will find old videos. I'm like, maybe if I delete this one, maybe if I delete. they never tell you anything.
No.
You don't know, and the rules have changed so much. I wouldn't even know where to begin. We have thousands of video. We have so much stuff that dates back to 2012, 2013. We were doing radio back then.
Yeah. The thing that's really bad about that is, what if that was our living?
Oh, yeah. You and I have long discussed that the Google does not like you making a living off of
That
them.
would just be horrible. I mean, if you were actually making a living on this, we'd have to start a mug club.
Well, and we are definitely the casualties of them doing things to other people.
Yeah.
Like the way they approached Steven Crowder, about that time was when the Dispatch really got hit. So whatever algorithm change they did to him and his content, it was affecting us. And we see that with the COVID thing. They're trying to address this situation. We're just casualties, of the same kind of thing. So, yeah. So we'll see. I think we just decided, we're going to do this show. We're going to do our thing, and we'll see. YouTube's one option. We'll put it on some other stuff, let you decide how to help navigate that out there for you guys. Maybe you just let us know. Put a comment in. Please put it on this kind of thing. Put it on this one. This is the one I use. We've had experience with Stitcher and iTunes. You've done a lot of that kind of work, so I think people can expect that.
If there's any topics you would like us to talk about, also let us know about that below, too, because we like to talk about a lot of things.
Yeah, talk a lot. A couple OGs talking all sorts of nonsense. So.
All right, well, welcome back to News Talk with Brandon and Bob.
I know.
Pop culture censorship.
I know.
What's going on?
I know. You probably have no idea what even happened. It was Back to the Future.
What's going on with Back to the Future?
It landed on Netflix. And I know. How many times have you seen Back to the Future?
Handful.
Okay. So there's a scene where he's in the 50s, and he's trying to get a hold of the magazine, right? And actually, this is Back to the Future 2, right? Because he goes back in time to get the sports the sports almanac. And he's in the principal's office, and he gets it and opens it up, and they realize that Biff has switched it, and it's ooh la la.
Yeah.
Right? So this version lands on Netflix, and they've censored ooh la la. It jump cuts. And it jump cuts very badly.
That's what I heard.
And it's been like a hoopla on the internet, like how could this even happen? In reality, it's a foreign version of the film, because it's a clip version where that country didn't want that in there. So whenever Universal sent in the version of Back to the Future to run with, Netflix just takes that file, puts it in their system, and that's what you get. So I thought it'd be interesting not only to talk about that, the fact that happens, because obviously there's massive censoring in different countries. There's different things that happen in films. If you were to go to China, they have massive censorship of even like Marvel movies, something that we take for granted that there's, it should be wide open and fun. There's huge things that happen over there, so these films are modified for their audience. But I came through a massive list. I hold in my hands a massive list of 2 pages of things that Disney Plus has censored. I just wanted to see what you would actually be shocked or surprised by, what you even know of.
Let's give us.
Can you think of a Disney movie or a story that you've heard over the years where you know of something that's in something? There's been maybe a ban on it, a recall on it, a cover, anything you could think of.
I just don't keep up on it that much, so.
Well, I just thought you may have heard a couple of these stories. So, for instance, for me, was the famous story of Lion King. You know, there's something in Lion King that was controversial.
What happened?
So there's a scene in Lion King where Simba lays on the ground.
Okay.
And he's going to look up at the sky, and he's going to see the ghost of Mufasa.
Okay, I remember that.
Okay, you're with me. Well, when he does, the stuff kind of flies into the wind, and it spells out the word sex.
Oh, is that true?
That is absolutely true.
In the original
Absolutely.
cartoon movie?
100% true.
Never noticed it.
Yeah, they tried to play this off as though it's spelled SFX because it moves very quickly. It is not. It's very clear that some animator, for whatever reason, decided this would be something funny and clever.
Kicks and giggles.
Yeah, I know. Rescuers. I think it's the original Rescuers. Famous shot, and they're in a car. I believe. Let me make sure I got this. And this is actually interesting because the person wrote this as saying an urban myth turned out to be true. It was never an urban myth. If you heard the story, it was people easily had screenshots of things as soon as the internet existed. But if you had a VHS tape, you could pause it and see. You couldn't believe this was actually so graphic. But there's a quick shot, and I think it literally is maybe 1 or 2 frames. I have no idea how this was found the first time. My theory is someone paused it for their kid or went somewhere and paused it, and it just happened to land in this quick shot where they move it past, and there's basically a naked Playboy model in the background.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, so Disney Plus has cleaned all this up, of course.
I'm oblivious.
Yeah,
Really
there's all these things out there. But there's all sorts of new ones. So let me run through a couple of the new ones. Toy Story 2, there were these outtakes. Remember the outtakes on the Toy Story movie where they had like the fake clips or whatever?
Yeah.
Toy Story 2, right? Stinky Pete. Remember Stinky Pete?
Yeah.
There's an outtake with him and the Barbies. Do you remember that one?
Does that have something to do with their chest or something?
It was like a casting couch joke,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah.
Like, come on, girls, let's go, whatever.
Yeah.
Gone. No casting couch jokes. Yep. Keep your copy of Toy Story 2 that has the casting couch scene. That's been cut out.
Well, let me ask you, piggybacking on the Back to the Future 2 thing. I mean, Netflix could be, or companies could be doing a lot of this stuff, and nobody notices.
That is true. Yeah. However, Netflix themselves didn't censor anything. This was just a mistake with the file.
I gotcha.
Of Universal sent the wrong one, and it really, I've read that was fixed. Universal found out about it, and they just sent the correct movie.
Okay.
That's also airing. So that actually was a blunder, but it brought awareness to the fact that there is a massive amount of censorship and tweaking. And Disney is notorious for doing this. Like, so for instance, another example would be Splash, the famous Tom Hanks movie with Daryl Hannah.
Right, I remember.
And her backside is naked in several parts, which of course they don't want that to be for the littlest kids. Okay, fair enough. So there's a lot of those.
So do you oppose these moves?
I actually have mixed feelings only because it was originally done that way, and no one appeared to have problems.
Gotcha.
So if the movie is appropriately rated, and I'm not opposed to PG-13 being on Disney Plus because many of the Marvel movies are PG-13. A lady's backside falls under PG-13 guidelines, so I don't see the reason why you would need to filter that out. That doesn't make sense.
Gotcha.
I understand if there's something that was done maliciously, like the Lion King or the Rescuers thing, where you feel like, well, we might as well just take it out. I think they should put a little disclaimer in the beginning of it. This film has been modified, because that used to be the normal standard that you would do with a movie. Is you watch a movie on TV, they'll say this film has been modified for your television airing. People always thought that had to do with the way it's trimmed so it would fit on your TV, which is true, but it usually is also because they cut content.
Sure.
Right?
I knew that, yeah.
Right. So some people, I think, are okay with this in a way, but I'm like, if it's a PG-13 content, even on Disney Plus,
I'm asking you specifically.
Yeah, I don't. I don't think they should make these moves. Adventures in Babysitting is an interesting one for me.
Elizabeth Shue.
Right.
Okay.
Now it's not on our Disney Plus yet. I don't know why, but it is on other countries, and they've already modified it. They actually modified this because there's a famous line of, don't F with the babysitter. They changed that line to be don't fool with the babysitter. But PG-13 rankings allow them to have one use of the F word.
Oh, I had no idea.
So even when it's been re-rated by our normal standards, it's still appropriate to do that. Now, not all movies do. So a lot of PG-13 movies do not have one, but they're allowed one.
I would suspect a lot of people would be okay with that, though.
Again, if it's rated a certain way and it has the appropriate warning in the beginning, I think just because it's Disney Plus doesn't nullify you as a parent of being responsible for what your kid does. Just plopping them in front of the TV and thinking that it's only Disney's responsibility to keep track of what content they watch is irresponsible.
No, I agree with that.
And Disney's going way overboard. This is not the appropriate thing. Of course, there's about a million examples. I thought a couple of them are very interesting, sort of social justice or weird 2020 type things. So, for instance, like Lilo and Stitch, there's a shot where Stitch is in the dryer, and they thought that the scene should be cut because kids might want to try to hide in the dryer. I thought that was just an obtuse take on life. It's like, what? Who? Okay, first off, your kid could hide in the dryer if they can get in the dryer, because my little boys would have hid in the dryer if they could have gotten in the dryer. So your house may not be safe if you have that kind of concern.
Well, I mean, that really goes to like all these little warning tags on every little product we have.
All right, so let me ask you about The Simpsons. They've had an episode that was censored because of Michael Jackson references. Do you think that's an appropriate thing to kind of, maybe we should, maybe not?
Just because of him only?
Correct.
Yeah, that's silly.
I know. It's like, why?
Is it because they don't want to offend the family?
I guess people may be a little offended that he has all these accusations, and I don't know. It's like there's no real. Yeah. Anyway, there's a lot of these kinds of things that. Jokes have been modified, some different things. There's one, this one I really was bothered with. There's actually a kid's show called Wizards of Waverly Place. This is one I did not know until I read the list.
Okay.
And the show has aired on their channels for years. I remember our kids watching it. It's like just a kid's show.
Okay.
And I know our kids have watched this for years. So on Disney Plus, this stuff's on there. The lady dresses kind of like a flamboyant New York business owner. And they have blurred her cleavage, no exposure, just cleavage. They blurred it. So many of the shots of her in her shirt, it'll be blurry right here.
Okay.
It's very strange. Like, I don't know. We have a weird approach of censorship here. All right, I want to contrast this with two areas of challenge.
Okay.
Disney Plus just released their first gay short. It's called Out.
Okay.
So how do you feel about kids on Disney Plus getting to watch a 9-minute short about coming out as gay to your parents?
How do I feel about it?
Yeah, anything of that.
I mean, it's nothing I'd want to expose any of my children to. But
right. But that's still your responsibility, right?
That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
It's a tough thing. I think it's a difficult time for Disney because they're trying to play both sides, right? They're trying to be parent friendly by cleaning up Waverly Place and things like that, but you're simultaneously going, well, I'm okay with this also, which some parents are not okay with.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a parent and you want to discuss that issue with your child, you should do that without Disney's input.
We could do a whole segment on that short because I found it to be very bigoted against people that are not gay. Like, it was a very strange take for me. The biggest conspiracy, the one that's the hardest thing is, will we ever have Song of the South?
Song of the South.
Oh, come on, man. It's, yippity-doo-dah.
Oh!
Yeah.
Yeah. What's wrong with that?
A lot of racial overtones to that,
I was gonna say,
right?
yeah.
That's a lot of racial overtones.
Oh, gosh, but you could go back to, like, Heckle and Jekyll.
Yeah, but that's not Disney.
I know.
The Disney made Song of the South.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's ever going to land. True story. When we traveled up north to Georgia, we went to this little podunk mom and pop shop on the side of like a forge, like a hole in the ground, basically. And they had like a gift shop. And I thought it was just going to be gift shop stuff for this giant lookout thing, which it was. But they have tons of this other stuff just to make money. I got 2 copies of Song of the South. So I actually have a copy. We should do a viewing of Song of the South. Absolutely. I have a copy. It's an unauthorized copy. I'm sure that's ripped from I think Laserdisc is the last time it was ever available. It was back when they were doing Laserdisc, and you could get a very good digital copy. People made copies. I assume that's where it came from. I have no idea. I'm not going to turn these people in or anything like that. Disney can hunt them down on their own time and own dime. So,
well, one other thing I want to talk to you about in this segment is Last Dance.
Yeah, well, that's a different. I mean, yeah, so you're not into sports like at all.
I used to be.
Okay, so let me ask you. So are you a big Jordan 90s basketball, 80s, 90s basketball fan?
Yeah, 80s and 90s was when I liked basketball.
Yeah, me too. And it was, so The Last Dance is a great documentary. Evidently in the last year of the second three-peat, so there's 2 three-peats, right? He retired, played baseball, and came back. He had asked or somehow got permission for some sort of documentary team to follow them around all season and examine the team. And Phil Jackson began that season as The Last Dance. And the documentary opens, and I've only watched a couple episodes and I've heard a lot of commentary, and it's blown up into a big deal. And it's been very interesting to examine not only the legacy of Michael Jordan and his work ethic and his desire to win, it's brought a lot of exposure to other players that have kind of been forgotten about. And it also highlights what I think most of us grew up and enjoyed about basketball, where we don't like basketball now, in that it was a very fundamental, skill-driven, physical game, whereas now it's a much more finesse, shooting-driven, fast Showtime kind of game. Yeah. And we've kind of lost a lot of that appeal. So The Last Dance brought a lot of that to light. What I thought was interesting to discuss is people were bored during the outbreak anyway. And when you're bored, you were going through your house, you're cleaning things out. So there's already a little bit of a boom that was happening in some sports cards and different collectible things. And I kind of do a little bit of that with my pop show, as I talk about that from time to time. And it created a boom of Michael Jordan fans. And people would go out after these special cards that were basically certified to be perfect, which when you're rewinding a card from the 80s, finding a perfect one is like a needle in a stack of needles, right? But it didn't go up in value like a little bit. I'm talking things were going up into like tens of thousands of dollars. People were paying $500 to open a pack of cards to see if they could find this Jordan card. Well, then it was about, well, what about Scottie Pippen? What about Dennis Rodman? What about these famous players from that era? Now things that were worth $10 are now $80, $100. It's like,
so a Bill Laimbeer card.
Not a popular player.
Oh, okay.
Not somebody anybody has, and there are not good stories about Bill Laimbeer. The legacy of Bill.
Facetious.
Yeah, the legacy of Bill did not catch on. But I think that there's been a lot of that appreciation of the vintage of the 80s and 90s that there has not been much of yet, and people have been more interested in understanding, like, what Magic Johnson really played like, and what's the legacy of, from Bird and Magic into the Jordan era, and then kind of what happened, and why did the team get broken up, and what are the financial reasons. And it brought a lot of nostalgia in the sports world and created like a boom. And the trading card boom has not stopped. I thought, well, when the Last Dance ends, it'll be it. People shifted into, well, what about vintage baseball cards? So you're seeing a boom of other players. And they're announcing other documentaries. Like, well, if this documentary, which, how we talk about copycats all the time, right? So if this documentary works, let's do these other documentaries. So they're going to do one on Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa, right? Remember how addictive all that was? Everybody, people, you didn't care about sports, but everybody was tuning in. Who hit a home run last night? Where are they at? So there's going to be a whole documentary on that. So what does that mean? All the Mark McGwire, they call it PSA 10 cards, Sammy Sosa cards, some Canseco cards, Clemens cards, they're skyrocketing because of this kind of stuff. So
fantastic. It's
very interesting that all this stuff's happening, and if it's not in your like niche, nobody knows it's happening. I think that's very interesting. Do you not find that interesting when you find out that there's all these different things that are sort of outside your scope?
Yeah, I mean, I would have never thought about it, that's for sure. But I do have to say that I do enjoy ESPN 30 at
30 on 30?
30 on 30,
So
when they do
yeah.
the Bird versus Magic and all that stuff is fascinating.
The stories are amazing.
Yeah, it's just like, oh man, I remember those days. Have
you looked into like how much of a trash talker Larry Bird was?
Oh yeah, I watched that stuff on YouTube a lot too.
And he was literally like the most insane trash talker. Imagine going up to Xavier McDaniel, and he's like, right there on the right, I'm going to get that ball, I'm going to shoot it in your face. And they call timeout, and he does the exact thing. And not like once. There's like 30 stories of him going in the locker room for the 3-point shootout, and like, was y'all's going to finish second place? It's like, did he take his warm-up jacket one time? The stories are just nuts. Social media wouldn't tolerate any of this nonsense now.
It's kind of funny too, because a lot of these YouTube videos, you find out a lot more years later, when you would think people like Isaiah Thomas and all these people kind of disrespected Bird. But when they talk about it years later, they're like, man, that's one of the hardest players I ever played against. But at the time, they couldn't say that.
Yeah, and it's funny because it creates more conspiracy. As more information comes out, it creates more conspiracy. So, for instance, Isaiah was not on the Dream Team. and this comes up in The Last Dance, and the conspiracy goes that Jordan was asked to play. He said, "I'm not playing if Isaiah's on the team," because they were feuding over the way Thomas didn't pass the baton to them when they finally won. He walked off.
I remember that.
But a lot of players didn't like Isaiah Thomas. He was kind of a very physical, difficult player to play against, and everybody kind of despised the fact that he had such a nice cherub look on his face all the time. He was always seen as the good guy, when Mahorn and Lane Beer were viewed as the villains, when he was just as bad, according to them. So it's interesting that a lot of this stuff has come to light, and it is very interesting how much of this is on YouTube. In the sports circles, it was funny because they would talk about the ratings, and only 6 million people saw it. They would think this should be 10 million people. They were shocked the ratings didn't get higher and higher. They'd find out, like, I don't know, the equivalent of American Idol would have played, and it had higher ratings, and they're like, shocked, who's watching that? But to me, it was very fascinating to see how pockets of people have their interest, but they have no idea what's going on, in that circle. I just landed in this by accident. I have no idea how I even landed in it. It ended up down a rabbit's hole where it just dusted off that old love. So I grew up playing basketball. I was in Indiana, so I've played since I was 4. So that was kind of my thing. I just never got big enough to really be, successful.
Competitive.
Yeah, I mean, I was good at high school at times, but nothing of any significance. I was just too small. I had no weight. But in today's game, I can't tell you last time I watched a basketball game.
I have no interest.
And I watch clips, and I'm like, they never call fouls, or they call fouls over nothing. It's just a crazy game that I just can't find entertaining. So anyway, I just thought I would talk about something different. So we ended up talking about Disney censorship and The Last Dance in the same segment. I'm like, all right, folks, well, that's what you're going to get sometimes. So News Talk with Brandon and Bob.
All right.
All right, well, thanks for joining us on News Talk, and we enjoy your time.